a drink called a cabinet, Providence's Little Italy, and wiener hell. This week, we're in Rhode Island.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. Destination Eat Drink is for foodies who love to travel and travelers who love to eat. And this week, I'm talking to the editor-in-chief of Rhode Island Monthly, Jamie Coelho. But first, if you like Destination Eat Drink, be sure to rate and review the podcast on your podcast app and give up those 5 stars. And if you're planning a trip to Portugal this year, or you just want to know more about the cuisine of this fascinating country, my new Foodie Travel Guide ebook is available at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. For just $9.99, you get all the best things to eat and drink all around Portugal and all kinds of fun things to do. That's at buymeacoffee.com/destinationeatdrink. Jamie Coelho is the editor-in-chief of Rhode Island Monthly magazine, an institution in the Ocean State. Jamie's worked at Men's Health magazine, Boston magazine, and has been published in places like the Boston Globe, Yankee magazine, and now she's here to talk about the food and drink of Lil Rhodey, a place where I lived for over 20 years and absolutely love the food there. She tells me about Rhode Island calamari, pizza strips, and coffee milk, plus a brand new food hall in Rhode Island, as well as tons and tons of restaurant recommendations. Okay, I'm starving, so let's eat.
Destination Eat Drink.
Jamie Coelho from Rhode Island Monthly magazine. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink. Great to have you on the show. Can't wait to talk to you about one of my favorite places on the planet, Rhode Island.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about my favorite subject, which is food and restaurants.
Yes, food is a great topic, and it brings us all together. For folks who don't know, you're the editor-in-chief of Rhode Island Monthly, magazine I am very familiar with. But for folks who aren't, how would you describe it to them?
Well, Rhode Island Monthly is our state magazine, and we publish monthly, obviously, and cover all kinds of topics from local news to the food scene. So I would say we're most well known for our food coverage, as we try to cover the food scene in an expansive way across the state. And we cover it in terms of different themes, from outdoor dining in the summer to multicultural eats. We've done full restaurant packages on iconic Rhode Island foods. We've done federal hill guides. We've done anything under the sun. We find a topic for it, and we can build a whole magazine issue around it. Recently, we redesigned Rhode Island Monthly, so we have a whole new look and feel. We started in November of last year, but really launched it in January of 2025. And now we have an even more expansive opening section of the magazine with personal essays from amazing writers throughout the state, or even people who have moved on from Rhode Island but still want to write about the state. We've expanded our food section in the back of the magazine as well. We have a monthly dining review, in addition to 2 pages of all food news about openings and events, and Q&As with local chefs. We like to cover fashion, lifestyle coverage, but we do not stray from investigative reporting pieces either. We've covered a couple real hard-hitting stories that, may have been small mentions in the newspaper. And we have the ability to do long form in the magazine, where we can really tell a story almost like a movie scene. So we dedicate a lot of space to those stories. And we think it's really important to dig into the nitty-gritty details and write magazine articles almost as if they're the start of a novel or the start of a movie. And it keeps people engaged. They love getting the magazine and curling up on the couch with it, as opposed to scrolling on your phone on the couch. It's just like something tangible you can hold in your hands, and it helps you to truly relax and read something worthwhile to spend your time on.
What would be an example of one of those longer form articles that you guys have been able to dive into?
Well, we've done some investigative reporting pieces on a connection between the Providence police and an alleged cocaine dealer who was the nephew of the chief of police in Providence.
Wow.
So this was a small story in the local news, and we had a writer pitch that story to us. Wanted to dig into it a little bit more as the FBI was then investigating if there was a deliberate connection or if it was just a family tie that had nothing to do with each other. And that story came out last year and was our cover story. And then came out later that there apparently was sort of a connection with the sergeant, and the local news reported the follow up. So it was intense.
Yeah, and Rhode Island has had those stories throughout time. I mean, I remember when I moved to Rhode Island in 1990, this was at the height of Buddy Cianci's return. And when I got there, I just remember people from Rhode Island, Providence especially, telling me the stories about Buddy Cianci from the 80s before I got there. And I came from Chicago. I thought I'd heard everything, when it comes to political corruption. And they started telling me these stories. I was like, I felt like an innocent kid having his eyes open for the first time. I'm like, this really happened? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is what Rhode Island, and there's a long tradition of that. That type of corruption. Let's not focus on that though. Let's talk about food. Rhode Island to me is such an incredibly fascinating place because for me, it has so many dishes that are unique just to Rhode Island. I mean, you can be in Rhode Island and you can have a dish that everybody in Rhode Island knows, and you can just go right across the border into Connecticut or Massachusetts and you ask for that, and they will have no idea what you're talking about, much less if you go to other parts of the country. So that is what is so fascinating to me. And so I want to ask you about a few of these, describe them and, what you think of them. And let's start with one of my favorites, which is a New York system, or as people in Rhode Island used to, I don't know if they still call it this, but this is what they used to call it when I was there. They call it a gaga. A great
I prefer hot wieners. Yeah, hot wieners.
Hot wieners, yeah.
Don't ever, ever, ever ask for ketchup with a hot wiener, okay? That's the first thing you need to know. Because if you do, you go straight to wiener hell. And there's actually a sign inside Old Naville, New York system that says that on the wall. So they like to play around with people who come in and they have no idea about the culture of the hot wiener. So what it is it's a basically encasing. They use 3 different types of meat. It's hand ground in Rhode Island. And then they put it in a steamed bun topped with meat sauce, chopped onions, and celery salt. And you got to get it that way. It's all the way or no way to me. So you might smell like it for like 2 weeks after you eat it, but it is worth it. Trust me. Everyone loves them around here. It's iconic. And there's a whole history behind it too about how it made its way here.
And they're perfect after a very, very late night of being out that may or may not have involved some alcoholic beverages. I just remember going into these places.
Hangover cure. Yeah. Hangover cure. Purely Rhode Island.
Yeah. I used to remember going into these places and the guy would line them up on his arm, like 6 deep. And hand them over. I assume the health department doesn't allow that any longer, but that's just a vivid memory that I have. The next one I want to ask you about is called a cabinet, and related and awful, which, my brother, he's not from Rhode Island. We're from Chicago area. But whenever we talk about Rhode Island, he always brings up an awful. I think it's a great name. It's also a great thing to drink. Talk about cabinets and awfuls.
Okay, so those are 2 iconic Rhode Island drinks. I think you know about coffee milk too. That's the one that really is the start of it all, I would say, because the coffee syrup with the milk and ice cream is something that the cabinet has become from, which started with the coffee syrup from the coffee milk. So I went down to Delecta's in Warren, which is a pharmacy, a former pharmacy that operated as a pharmacy and soda fountain forever. And when they did away with their pharmacy business, they kept the soda fountain and they still make the cabinets there. And it's proprietary. The recipe is totally and completely reliant on their coffee syrup that they create in-house. They don't share the recipe for that. But you can get cabinets other places. They're just not the same as the one at Delecta's because of that. And then Newport Creamery is the home of the Awful Awful. And there's a whole story behind that as well, which started with Friendly's. So there's a correlation between Friendly's Fribble and the Awful Awful. So you have to go back and read about the history on that one. But we had created our own name to set it apart from what Friendly's had branded as originally the Awful Awful. And they called it the Fribble. And then there was a part of where basically Newport Creamery came in and had to rebrand it. So that's why it is called what it is today.
Yeah, the Awful Awful is, all these drinks you talked about. I should have brought up coffee milk first, because coffee milk is like a coffee syrup. It's been cooked down into just a syrup form. And when we moved to Portugal over 3 years ago, one thing, we only brought 3 suitcases with us each. That's all we brought. Mm-hmm. And in one of those suitcases was a bottle of coffee milk. Swear to God.
Yeah.
Couldn't live without it. But
what's your favorite brand? Do you like the Autocrat or?
Yeah, Autocrat. Autocrat is for me. And then what's the Autocrat and, I can't remember the name of the other one.
Well, there's a modern version of it today that Dave's Coffee has created. They're another Rhode Island business coffee place. So they create the coffee syrup with the natural ingredients as it was back in the day. So some of the knockoffs might have some different ingredients in it that weren't the same as when the syrup originated. So they do a good job with that.
And if you go to Rhode Island, you got to get a coffee milk just for the experience, because they
with
are
a hot wiener. You got to Olneyville, New York system. You've got to order a hot wiener with a coffee milk. It's like the two go together for some reason. I can't explain it. It doesn't make sense, but it just works. Don't question it. It just works.
Just go with it.
Yeah.
And the final Rhode Island drink, we did the cabinet, the Awful Awful, the coffee milk, is Dell's, which is like an Italian ice, is the best way that I could describe it. But for me, it's so much better than an Italian ice. And even if it's cold outside, as long as I'm in Rhode Island before Dell's closes down, I always go and get a Dell's. Do you love Dell's as much as I do, Jamie?
I do. And, it's something that you got to pass the tradition on to your kids around here, because I feel like their truck's always outside all the soccer games and different events that we have. And there's a particular thing about Dell's. It originated in Italy, and there's actually real chunks of lemon in it, which sets it apart from a lot of the more the other Italian ices that are out there that aren't the same. But they do, kids, you have to pass the tradition on to them, because there's a certain way you got to drink it. You can't ask for a straw with it, and you shouldn't eat it with a spoon. You've got to hold the cup with your hand, and sort of that will melt the ice around the cup. And then you hold it up to your mouth this way, up towards your mouth, and just the ice will melt and it will go into your mouth that way. So we were establishing that straws were banned way before that actually happened, because we don't need it. And yeah, you gotta eat it that way, and oftentimes with the pretzel stick in it too, just for that little added local tradition.
My girlfriend, who's a native Rhode Islander, the other thing she taught me about it is you can pour a little. Now, this is not for kids at soccer games, but you can pour a little bit of vodka in there. And, yeah, and it's so good. It's so good. But here's.
I think I have. I think I have tried that
Here,
before, I will
here,
say.
here's the Rhode Island thing about it. She's like, no, you don't stir it with a spoon. You don't stir it. You use your finger. You
Your
just
finger. Okay. Yeah.
stir it. It's like, all right, I guess the vodka's killing all the germs on my finger.
Uh-huh.
The Dells. But it's
I
really
like
good.
that.
I mean, it's like, oh man, the lemon and the vodka together, nothing like that on a hot summer day. It's so, so good.
There's so many iconic things in the restaurants, and we've got Federal Hill still has some of the Italian restaurants we know and love, like Angelo's is still there, and Camille's. Unfortunately, we're losing the tradition of the old canteen. I recently learned to a different restaurant, but it'll always be there, just not the same. We have stuffies, we have clam cakes. I
Yeah.
mean, calamari is our official state appetizer. That is another thing that we have to talk about. Rhode Island style calamari.
Let's talk about Federal Hill a little bit because
Okay.
whenever I come back to Rhode Island, we always make a trip to Federal Hill and we're always busy. It's always like we're coming back for a few days and we got family to see, we got friends to see. It's always a whirlwind. But I always say, Karen, we got to go up to Federal Hill. And she's like, yeah, let's make it quick. It's never quick because we got to go to Venda, we got to go to Tony's Colonial, we got to go to Roma, we got to go to Scialo's and get lemon squares. So it's always a big deal, and people want to see us, and we always show up with a big bag of food, so we're extremely popular. But talk about Federal Hill, because for me, when people talk about New England, Boston, Massachusetts specifically, they talk about the great Italian food at the North End, and I have been adamant at saying I put Federal Hill up against the North End of Boston any day of the week because the Italian food and tradition is so good there. Tell me
Right.
what your opinion is.
Well, I think it goes back to those family-owned places that have stayed in the family and not changed a thing. Like we see a lot of times in these food neighborhoods that wealthy owners buy up a bunch of places, and each of the places might become a shadow of its former self. But here in Federal Hill, we have Angelo's, which has been in existence for over 100 years now. They just celebrated their century birthday, and it's been passed down through the generations. And they still have the original menu board in the middle of the restaurant. They try to honor some of the prices from the past, and they preserve the history through photographs and other traditions in the restaurant. And we also have Camille's that is much the same. That opened, I believe it was in 1919. I'm trying to remember, or 1914 it opened, and it's known as it's very dark and luxurious inside the restaurant. They still abide by a lot of those fine dining white tablecloth principles, which are going out by the wayside. Always the old canteen was like that as well. You had to wear, back in the day, you had to wear a jacket if you were a man. Otherwise, you would have to go to the back of the restaurant and borrow a jacket off the rack in the back. Those traditions were always so important, and they still exist at all the food markets too. Like Venda is still running, and Tony's Colonial, as you mentioned. There's Roma, and we thought we were going to lose Ciala Bakery with the pandemic because it shut down, and everyone thought it was gone forever. We were all mourning and lamenting the loss of it, and then a buyer came in and just took it over, and it has been preserved the same with the same wood burning ovens that they got going there. So there's a lot here that is still the same. And yes, we do have some of those restaurants that have been taken over and are more mainstream or modern, but the heart of what we love about the neighborhood is still there. There's still De Pasquale Plaza with its cobblestone patio area and the fountain in the middle. They have live music on weekends, and you can still walk around the corner, and all the gentlemen are sitting on the benches that are painted red, white, and green, talking all day and having coffee until the early evening hours and into the early mornings as well. it just has that neighborhood feel. We are also like seeing a lot of takeovers of different multicultural restaurants on that same street of Atwells Avenue. But I would say that the ones that we know and love are really doing their hardest to keep it the same in a time when it is so challenging to operate a restaurant and turn a profit. So I'm just thankful for people like the family of Angelo's and Camille's and Venda for staying the course, and Caserta's too. Caserta's another one. I love the pizza there.
Wimpy
So
Skippy.
yeah, you know that.
So good, so good. Okay, so let's go off Federal Hill for a minute and go into Providence. Well, other parts of Providence. Tell me about a couple of your favorite places. Maybe some places. I'm always fascinated with new groups that are coming in. You know, immigrants often their first step on the economic ladder up is by opening a restaurant because there's fairly low barrier to entry. Sure, you got to come up with some cash, but you know, a lot of immigrants decide to open restaurants, and this is where a lot of the fascinating cuisine comes in. Rhode Island is not just Portuguese bakeries and Italian restaurants. Tell me about a couple of places that you particularly like, Jamie.
I would love to. So one of my favorite places is just what you mentioned. It's Dolores. It's a Mexican restaurant, and it is on Hope Street in Providence. So originally, the family came here to the United States, and they opened a Mexican restaurant, sort of on a fluke. The mother of the family, she taught herself how to cook, and the son, Joaquin Meza, wanted to open a restaurant, and his mother's cooking that she learned made him so happy that he wanted to give her a place to do that and share it. So they opened this Mexican restaurant called El Rancho Grande, and it was sort of an Americanized version of Mexican food that they thought the public wanted, and it was embraced and loved and cherished. But it didn't completely suit what they were used to eating back in Mexico. So their dream was to have an authentic Mexican style restaurant that served food from the region of the Mixteca region where they were from. And in order to do that, they needed to get in the corn from Mexico and import it and grind that corn and make their own tortillas. So eventually they ended up closing El Rancho Grande with the pandemic. It was a difficult time for any restaurant, but right before it hit, they had opened a new spot with the help of investors called Dolores. And Dolores is the type of Mexican restaurant they always wanted. And now they're able to import that corn in from Mexico, hand grind that corn and make their tortillas and serve it with all of their slow roasted meats. And it's the most special place. That last year, the mother, Maria Meza, earned a finalist nomination for the James Beard Awards for Best Chef Northeast. So they made it all the way from their little Mexican restaurant, El Rancho Grande, to the James Beard Awards. And it is phenomenal. So there's lots of places like that we embrace that immigrant culture, from Korean to Mexican to Middle Eastern even. And we are so happy to have everybody here.
What's one of your favorite Middle Eastern spots?
I gotta say, East Side Pockets on Thayer Street. I mean, again, with like the changing landscape of food, people do knock Thayer Street because it has changed so much and become so corporate. But East Side Pockets is still there, and it's been there, I don't know how many years now, maybe 3 decades. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. Maybe at least a couple decades, I think. And they are known for their falafel and their pitas, and it's run by the same family too. So we got to show them some love and appreciation that they're still here.
Yeah, that place has been there forever. That's a great spot.
Yeah.
You know, they call Rhode Island the Ocean State, and you mentioned earlier Rhode Island style calamari. Mm-hmm. What is it that makes a Rhode Island style calamari different than a calamari we might get somewhere else?
Well, the odds are when you get calamari somewhere else, even if it's across the United States, it's probably still coming from Rhode Island, because calamari is our biggest harvest out of any type of seafood, and most of it gets exported elsewhere, which is crazy. We are the home of calamari. It is like the number one, like I said, number one. And what sets it apart from everything else is our recipe is sort of lightly fried, and it's served with banana peppers and a little bit of marinara usually on the side. That's the simplest way you can get it. But there are tons of places that try to do their own variations on it as well. And one of those places is called Justo in Newport, and they use all Rhode Island seafood on their menu, which is a little bit more elevated than other restaurants. And they have a squid ink calamari on their menu, which is phenomenal. And I love that. They use a squid ink in the batter. And they're going to be opening a second outpost in Providence. We have a new food hall coming, which is big news. It's called Track 15. It's going into the former Union Station building on the ground floor, and there will be 7 different Rhode Island-centric food vendors within that food hall. And the premise is that they need to embrace Rhode Island cuisine and serve Rhode Island food and ingredients, and use ingredients from Rhode Island. Dolores is in there, as I just mentioned. We have Justo serving all kinds of Rhode Island seafood. There's a place called They're doing burgers and sandwiches. There's Mother Pizzeria. There's going to be a new Middle Eastern restaurant in there called Tolia. And Dune Brothers is another vendor, and they're doing fish and chips, lobster rolls, clam cakes, and chowder as well. So we're looking forward to that in the springtime probably. And it'll be Providence's first real locally based food hall.
That's exciting news because they've been trying to get a food hall in that area for decades. Like as long as I can remember, they've been trying to do that, and they're finally getting it done. You said in the old Union Station, so that's right. That's right downtown, or as we say in Providence, down city.
Down city. And Union Station Brewery is still there, so that will continue to run, which is awesome too. Because I believe that was the city's first real craft brewery that still exists today, even before Trinity. So
perfect. Yeah. Love Trinity too. Give them some love. Mm-hmm. Let's talk. I realized that we skipped over one of my favorite Rhode Island dishes that I always get when I come back, and that's pizza strips. And trying to describe pizza strips to other people is kind of difficult because when you describe, they're like, wait, that's all it is? But it doesn't matter because all it is delicious. Talk about pizza strips, and where's your favorite place to get pizza strips, Jamie?
Oh, you got to call it party pizza because it's not a birthday party without pizza strips, right? So basically it is a piece of focaccia-like bread topped with just tomato sauce. No cheese. You can't put cheese on it because then it's not a pizza strip. Some places might put a little dusting of pecorino romano, but to me, I like mine here. So there is a story about how this came to be, which is kind of, up for debate, but I believe it. I tried to get to the bottom of how this happened, and it is said that back in the day, bakeries used to make pizzas, and they would use the leftover dough from bread to make pizzas, and then they would leave the pizza out on the counter so that people could come in and just buy them right off the counter. But then the health department apparently started cracking down on that because they come in the bakeries and see this pizza with cheese on top sitting out all day. So this bakery decided that they would just take the cheese off and leave it out with sauce for people to come by because they just didn't have the space for the refrigeration. And that is the legend of how the pizza strip was born. And it's a classic Rhode Island food that people bring to Super Bowl parties, to birthday parties, cookouts, you name it. And you could just leave it out on a table and it's fine. So makes it easy. And we actually did a pizza strip taste test here at Rhode Island Monthly years ago, where I drove around and my colleagues drove around to all the bakeries in Rhode Island. We brought them back. We set them all up on a conference room. We created a rating sheet for everyone to submit their scores for their favorites. And the winner, based on crust, appearance, and sauce, was D. Palmieri's in Johnston, which has stayed the same all of
my favorite.
Well, is it your favorite?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Well, yeah. I believe that one was my favorite too. I'm trying to remember who came. I really love the original Italian bakery too. They have pizza chips,
yes,
which is fairly similar, except they're round. little rounds of dough, and then they top it with the sauce. They do put a little dusting of pecorino romano on there, and they have different types of flavors you can get. But definitely my favorite, those two.
I think pizza chips are a relatively new addition to the cuisine of Rhode Island because I don't remember it being there. And then I remember one time when we came back after we left Rhode Island, I saw pizza chips. I was like, what are pizza chips? I got to try these. and they're great. And I started asking some of my Rhode Island friends. I asked Ron St. Pierre, who was a dear friend of mine who you may or may not know, but he was a radio legend in Rhode Island. And he was like, pizza chips, what are you talking about? I'm like, if anyone would know, it would be him. I mean, he was dialed into all that stuff. But yeah, he had never heard of pizza chips either. Rest in peace, Ron. Where do you live in Rhode Island, Jamie?
So I actually live on the East Bay. So I'm right from the border of Warren. Warren is a great little food town. I actually live in Swansea, Mass, which used to be part of Barrington. It's kind of funny. But the East Bay and Warren's become a great little food town in its own too, with so many phenomenal restaurants. And that's where Delectus Pharmacy is that I mentioned. There's a restaurant called Bywater, a new one called St. Martha, which is incredible. There's a Square Peg and a new place called, what is it called? Stingy Alley. It's a cocktail bar that's amazing too. But there's a lot of tradition there with Blount Clam Shack. Blount is a family that's synonymous for harvesting quahogs and making chowder. And they have the best clam cakes and chowder. So we are happy to be in that little neighborhood close by where we can just go out for dinner on a weeknight, and we have about 24 different restaurants to choose from.
Warren is a great foodie town, and so is Bristol, which is just down the road from there. Last time we were in Rhode Island, last summer, we went over to Bristol and Warren and did a video for some of our favorite places there. And it reminded me when we went over there how there's this East Bay, West Bay thing in Rhode Island, because I always lived in the West Bay in Warwick and in Providence and, places like this. And then later down in Hope Valley. And it reminded me how infrequently, for the decades that I lived in Rhode Island, how infrequently we made it over to the East Bay. And it's kind of criminal because there's so much good stuff going on over there. And I was especially taken by the Portuguese, by the strong Portuguese community in Bristol. Like we walked by a travel agency and they had like cruises and trips to Portugal. And I was like, I'll bet they sell it out, because there's so many. We actually ran into a guy and we started speaking Portuguese with him, who was just out there painting a house. And we just started talking to him and he's like, oh yeah, my painter, he's Brazilian. And we started speaking Portuguese. He was so excited that we were speaking Portuguese with him.
East Providence also is a very concentrated Portuguese town. There's some great restaurants there like Odinige, and you got bakeries there, that Taunton Avenue Bakery, all these great places where they don't change a thing. Just that's a Rhode Island thing. I feel like people just don't like change, so you keep it the same from the decor to the menu, and you have to change the prices, unfortunately. But people don't like that. But yeah, Portuguese is such a great part of our culture too, and I'm glad we have so many of those places. I actually have a book coming out in July. It's called Rhode Island Food and Drink Crawls. So in the book, I profile a lot of these little towns and neighborhoods and like what to eat and drink in each of them. And I've got 2 profiles, one on Warren, one on Bristol. So I discuss a little bit about the Portuguese heritage as well.
That's so exciting. I didn't know you had a book coming out. Share with us one or two of your favorite little crawls, because these are things that I love designing, is like whether it's in Newport or whether it's in Providence, or are these little crawls that you can do and get so much interesting food.
There's just so much to do. It was hard to condense it into like just a couple of places that you could do in a day, but I'm pretty ambitious, and I included 8 places in some of those crawls. So you got to get up early with the sun, and then you're going to be out late night until the early morning hours with my crawls. Can you handle it?
I can. I've done it. I can handle it. Give me one or two that you'd like to share with us.
maybe the West End, just because that's such a walkable neighborhood. And there's a lot of newer places there that are getting a lot of national shine from places like Eater and the New York Times and things like that. So let's see. Actually, I'd start like downtown. So my favorite restaurant is Gift Horse, and that is in downtown. And it is a newer restaurant that serves basically elevated Rhode Island seafood with a Korean flair. So they have a Korean chef who takes the Rhode Island seafood and really creates some imaginative dishes that are unlike anything else in Providence. And then right across the way is its sister restaurant, Oberlin, which is also getting a lot of national shine. And they create handmade pastas and breads and seafood, and everything goes into this giant wood burning oven. And the atmosphere there is otherworldly. It's just beautiful with marble countertops and a beautiful mural, fresco mural on the ceiling. And those two places are just two of my favorites. From there, then I would go over to the West End and hit some other places. One of my favorites is Pickerel, which is a ramen restaurant, and the chefs there have traveled all over Japan to learn and refine their technique for making ramen. Across the street from there is a beautiful cocktail bar that's been around for a long time. It was like the original speakeasy here in Providence. It's called the Avery. It's right across the street from there. And then we've got There, which is a sandwich shop and burger joint where you can get some late night food after some cocktails. But you got to also go for the original late night food later on, which is the New York System, which we talked about earlier. So those are just a few of the places. There's so many, but I can eat a lot. So I eat a little bit at each place, maybe an appetizer or, share a bunch of things with friends. So you get a bite of everything and then move along to the next spot. So
this is what I call the grazing method, and I'm a big proponent of it. Don't be shy about just going in and only ordering an appetizer, because you've got to pace yourself. You got 3 or 4 places to go to, man. You can't blow it all on the first place, So this is a great idea. Well, Jamie Coelho from Rhode Island Monthly, I'm so pumped to hear about your book. I would love to have you come back when the book comes out and talk a little bit more in depth about your little food trails of Rhode Island, because man, I mean, there's Newport, there's East Bay, there's West Bay, there's Providence. You could go up to Woonsocket, I would imagine, and of course South County and Westerly and Watch Hill and all those places. So if you'd come back, I would love to have you.
That would be phenomenal. I know I could talk for like days about food. It's hard to condense it all into a short interview. So yes, we need a part 2. I'm all for it.
All right. We'll do it when the book comes out. Jamie Coelho, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been great talking to you, connecting with you about one of my favorite places on the planet, Rhode Island. Folks should definitely visit Rhode Island and pick up a copy of Rhode Island Monthly. It's worth your while, and it'll really enrich your trip there.
Thank you. And I hope when you come back, you hit me up so we can go explore together.
And have a coffee milk.
Yes.
Okay. Can't wait for that new book from Jamie. You can check out the latest edition of Rhode Island Monthly or subscribe at rhodeislandmonthly.com. And let me say it again. Rhode Island is a very special place. And with its great food, it's a place where you have to visit. Right between Boston and New York, it's easy to get there, and it's so rewarding. If you'd like to hear more of my conversation with Jamie, you can get that on my Substack. Jamie tells me about Johnny Cakes, another classic Rhode Island dish. You can become a Substack member and listen to that at destinationeatdrink.substack.com. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're enjoying mezza in Istanbul, tapas in Barcelona, and cicchetti in Venice. It's all about small plates. So don't miss that. Until then, get over to destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a brand new video. This one is about a beer crawl I did in Ghent, Belgium. In one place, I had to leave my shoe as a deposit for the beer. It's a hilarious video, and there's some great beer in Ghent. You can see that by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com or go to my YouTube channel. That's at youtube.com/@destinationeatdrink946. You can also check out my new foodie travel guides. I just posted a brand new one for the island of São Miguel in the Azores. You can get that and all of my other foodie travel guide ebooks at buymeacoffee.com/Destination Eat Drink. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson, and I will see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.